FNCS is bad. I know that sounds harsh. I'm not talking about the current season. I'm not talking about the current meta. I'm talking about the format we've ran this year for FNCS is bad. But I want to talk about how it could be so much better, so much simpler. I also want to talk about, should they be bringing out a zero build FNCS? Should the game mode be duos all year? And what can Epic do to finally fix the cheater problem that is apparently going crazy right now in competitive Fortnite? There's a lot to talk about. Let's jump into it. Let's kick off with the game mode. We have been running duos for years now, and do I think duos is the best game mode for competitive Fortnite? Yes, but do I think we should be running duo FNCS all year, every year? No. I feel like duos is the main competitive game mode, and it should be in Fortnite. It is the most competitive and is the most fun to watch. In my opinion, it's the most fun to play, and it's also the most accessible for people trying to get into competitive. I do really like trios. I'm not the biggest fan of squads, but with trios, adding that extra teammate in there makes it really hard for people to compete if they're climbing up through the ranks. And yes, FNCS is for the best of the best players, but if Fortnite competitive doesn't have a steady influx of players, if we only cater towards the top tier pros, the game mode dies. Everyone knows this. This isn't Valorant, this isn't League of Legends, this isn't a conventional esport. The reason why Fortnite competitive succeeds is because it's open to anyone. We need to keep that going, and I think duos does that best behind solos. Now, if we had ran any other game mode for as long as we've ran duos, I genuinely think competitive would be in dire straits right now. It would be near death. If we ran squads, trios, or even solos for the last few years straight like we've had duos, we would be in a much worse place. So then why am I even mentioning the game mode? Because it doesn't need to be one or the other. I've talked about this for a few times now. The first FNCS of the season being duos is almost pointless for the most part as far as the LAN goes, because we now have a LAN event this year, the $2 million global championship. The 3 FNCSs are qualifiers leading up to that. So obviously you need to have the same game mode for all 3 of those seasons. You can't qualify to a duo LAN in a squad event. You could, but it wouldn't make too much sense. But when you take into account the fact that there are 50 teams going to Copenhagen and only 8 of them from the entire world qualified in the first season, meanwhile in this season alone 10 teams from EU and 10 teams from NA are going to qualify. That's 20 teams from only 2 regions in one season compared to 8 across the entire world. The first season of FNCS, as far as the LAN goes, is basically a formality. I think that's a good thing. Epic knows that most teams who qualify in the first season, by the time the LAN comes around, a lot of them actually have already tried to split up, they've had major issues, or they're not on top of their game anymore. So I think the first season of the year doesn't actually have to be duos at all. It'd be really fun to see us change up the game mode to solos or trios for a bit of flavor. I think the perfect format as far as game mode goes from right now is we have an OG solo FNCS. Again, if you maybe haven't heard, I hope you have, we are getting a chapter 2 throwback OG season at the end of this chapter. There was leaks in the game files of an OG FNCS. I think this would be the perfect time to run solos. This is for a few reasons. Firstly, it is the most popular game mode. Whether you see it on social media with the pros complaining about it or not, it is the most popular game mode. Like I talked about earlier, anyone can get on, anyone can compete. You don't need teammates, you don't have to practice with anyone, you can just jump on and play. And for that reason, it is massive for the player base. I do understand there's a lot of top tier pros who don't like solos because it is very RNG. I'm not saying it's the most competitive game mode, but it is very exciting to watch, and it's very good to get new people into the game, which during OG FNCS is the perfect time to do that. Also, it is a chapter 2 throwback. Other than squad FNCS for chapter 2 season 1, chapter 2 season 2 and 3, which we are getting in OG, were solo FNCS seasons. So we know that the meta works, we know the map works, and it would be absolutely perfect. Reason number 2, it gives a lot of people a chance to actually grind the game a little bit more and prove themselves. If you haven't been able to find a good duo mate with only solo victory cups as a way to prove yourself as a solo player, and let's be honest, they're not really the best indication of overall skill, you're probably struggling to find teammates. Where if we had a solo FNCS where you had a chance to prove yourself as a solo, that would help you tremendously going forward, going back to duos as the main competitive game mode. Now again, OG FNCS is going to be the perfect time to capitalize on the massive influx of players that we're going to get, same as we did last year, and I think a solos does that best of all. But again, this would not qualify you to the LAN, it would just be a standalone solo FNCS, and it'd just be great to see who's the best solo player right now. As much as it's great for up and coming casuals, I want to see who the best player is right now on their region as a solo. We haven't had this for years now, basically since DreamHack. I would love to see a stacked solo event every single season. Even if FNCS is duos, I would love to see like a DreamHack type thing run like we used to, whether it be a third person or Epic Games ran one. It would be awesome to see a solo event every season. But I do think the first season of the chapter or the last season of the chapter after the LAN should be a solo event, but it doesn't qualify you to the LAN. This then means, like I just pointed out, the first season of the chapter is basically pointless as far as the LAN. So if you run a solo FNCS in OG, you could then also run a FNCS trios to kick off chapter 6 season 1 for people who want that bit of variety, a bit bigger of a game mode, a little bit of a shake up to kind of add some variety. We get to shake up the teams, which would create some really cool content with new duos, like, you know, splitting up to make trios, picking up a third player. It would be really, really exciting, and it would shake things up. Then we could go back to regular duo FNCS for the last 2 seasons to qualify through to the LAN event. Like I said, only one team on most regions is making it from the first season. It basically doesn't function for the LAN. Then we would start gearing up for the LAN event, go back to duos, the main competitive game mode. This gives 2 seasons for duos to obviously form, find their duo, qualify for the LAN. It would make things more exciting, the teams would be more relevant, and changing it up and keeping things fresh is why Fortnite succeeds. Again, this is not a traditional esport. A lot of the things I'm describing might not be the best way to make the most competitive game mode, but that's not why Fortnite is Fortnite. This, again, isn't Valorant. This isn't League of Legends, not Counter-Strike. There is a little bit of goofiness to it, and it's because of the viewership and the player base that Fortnite competitive is even a thing. Epic only runs it because it's an ad right now. It makes people want to play the game, grind the game, spend money on it, and it keeps them playing. Fortnite have no desire to actually run a competitive scene, in my opinion. They don't actually care about competitive. They just know that for the money they're investing into it right now, it keeps people interested in the game. It keeps people making content so they get a bigger return on their investment. It might sound harsh, but that is just the honest truth of how Fortnite sees competitive in my eyes. I'm basing this off the decisions they make and the things they've done in the past. They've basically got the prize pool as low as it can possibly be while still maximizing player base, and that's why they won't just throw more money at it for the sake of it. This isn't a different company that likes the esport. They've just got a successful esport, so they might as well keep it running. But I think this would create a lot of excitement, and that change up would keep things fresh, which I think is overall better for the game, even if it is maybe a little bit less competitive. Next up, let's talk about the format. You've probably heard me complain about this. I think the current FNCS format is terrible, but it's very close to being extremely good. It's just a few things that are making it terrible, which could so easily be fixed. First off, why is it only 4 weeks long, including grand finals and semifinals, and we have a massive break in the middle? The qualifiers need to be at least 3 to 4 weeks long like they used to be. There is no money in the qualifiers of FNCS. The players are playing for nothing except for to get to semifinals and grand finals. So it doesn't cost Epic anymore by running more weeks of the qualifiers. And even with no prize pool, with an actual format that's worth grinding and worth following, it would get more players and more viewers and cost absolutely nothing. I don't know why we're rushing through FNCS when it's supposed to be the pinnacle of competitive Fortnite, and it's everything that everyone is grinding towards in competitive Fortnite. Yes, the Solo Victory Cup finals have a chance of getting your easier earnings because all you have to do is win one game, but a lot of players still have their dreams and hopes on making it further into FNCS. 99% or more of the players that queue up for FNCS don't think they're going to make money. They're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they like to compete and they want to test themselves in the main event of the season. And when you only have 2 weeks of qualifiers and the first round on the main region EU only qualifies 2,000 people, it makes no sense. The first round should be way wider of a margin, like top 10,000 or top 5,000 at least on EU. They need to open up all the margins more. And what you're thinking, Aussie, but it's supposed to be the main competitive mode of the season. Why are we trying to have, casuals make it through? They're still going to be good players, and because you have a longer qualifying format, you can taper this off more smoothly so it gives more chance for the pros to go through. If you disconnect in one game or you have a bit of bad luck, you can still make it through. If you're running multiple weeks of it, if you have one bad week or something goes wrong, again, you'll still make it through. And the future rounds, round 2, 3, and 4, at least they used to, have skill-based matchmaking anyway. So if little Timmy makes it through in 10,000th on the dot, they're so excited they've made it to round 2 of FNCS. They're not going to do fantastic in round 2. The pros are still going to verse the pros, and it affects nothing except for giving people something to grind for and actual hope to play in FNCS. At this point, if you're not a top 2,000 player on at least the main regions, you're only going to get to play 2 chances at FNCS. Week 1 qualifier 1, week 2 qualifier 1. That's it. That's all you're playing for. And you're probably thinking, oh, but Epic wants to make it more competitive. And I get that. But then why is round 2 top 1,000? You go from, on EU at least for the first season of this chapter, you went from 1 million duos. You went from 1 million players, 500,000 duos down to only 2,000. But then in the next round, you went from 2,000 down to 1,000. 50% of the people who queued up qualified. It makes it a complete non-eventful round that feels like it means nothing. I just don't understand why they make it so hard to qualify and then so easy in the very next round. You could just tape that off so much more slowly, and then you would have so much more to play for. Now, also, again, you could have multiple qualifying rounds. It doesn't only have to be 3 or 4 rounds in a week, but if they want to have 4 rounds in a week, so much easier to do like top 5,000, top 1,000, top 200, top 50. So much more exciting to watch. It's so much more of a taper off, and you will get better competitive game modes. Also, I have no idea why Epic has decided to turn off skill-based matchmaking. If you don't know, in tournaments, if you're on 0 points, you're not going to queue up against someone on 300 points because obviously they are doing better. They're going to get put against better opponents, and it's going to be better practice, a better test of their skill, and overall better games. Epic has decided to turn this off after round 1, which means round 2 and round 3, you have pro teams dropping 40, 50, and 60 bombs in FNCS qualifying later rounds. It makes no sense. You probably think, oh, that's better for the pros because they're better, so they're dropping bigger games. No, they hate it. The pros want actual practice. They want it to feel like FNCS. They want to feel like they're playing for something. They're not just running kill races in ranked. It's not benefiting anyone, and I have no idea why Epic's done the qualifiers like this. So I want 3 to 4 weeks of qualifiers with a way smoother tapering of the rounds. At the moment, we currently have the round 4 finishing in a set lobby, but with the way the semifinals format works is you've already qualified to the semifinals by not even making the final round. So if you are in the final round, you're already through. You're playing for nothing. Once you make it to round 4 of just week 1, you can stop queuing up for the rest of FNCS. You don't even have to queue up into that round 4. It makes no sense. Why are we qualifying people like this? I just don't understand. Now, I know you're thinking, Aussie, but there's upper bracket and lower bracket semifinals. That's what they're playing for. Well, let me break down how some pros are actually happier to be playing in the lower bracket than the upper bracket. Now, shout out Kinch Analytics for this graph. It's amazing. Don't freak out. Don't panic. There's a bunch of arrows, but I'm gonna make it make sense. Okay, so top 255 teams on the region are going to make semifinals. The top 50 make upper bracket, and then the next 205 teams make lower bracket. Now you think upper bracket must be a huge advantage because if you win one of the 5 games, you go straight through to grands. That is true, but look what happens if you get bottom 25. You are now dropping down to lower bracket day 2, where you stand a chance of being relegated and dropping out of FNCS entirely if you do bad in lower bracket round 2. Compare that to lower bracket round 1, where if you get top 30, you're going to jump up to upper bracket, which means you now have no chance of dropping out of semifinals. You're still going to at least make it through to lower bracket day 3, but if you do poorly, you're just going to end up in lower bracket day 2 anyway. So if you take a team, and I've been talking to Blake, for example, Blake currently, if he made upper bracket, he would be guaranteed contested at Grand Glacier by 2 other teams. There'd be 3 teams dropping what is already a very average drop. The chances are, if he has a couple of bad games, he might actually place inside the bottom 25, and he's going to drop out down into the lower bracket. Compare that to where the lower bracket, because since it's not set lobbies, doesn't mean he's going to be guaranteed contested by anyone. He's only going to get top 30, and then he's going to jump up into the upper bracket anyway. So for teams like this, it's actually an advantage to be in the lower bracket starting in semifinals. Also, the main thing that really matters with the semifinals format is day 3. As long as you're in upper bracket on day 3, you get to play 3 games. All you gotta do is get top 25 in those 3 games. You go through to grands. If you don't get top 25, you drop down to lower bracket. You get to play another 3 games. You've only got to get top 15. 40 of the 50 duos are qualifying on day 3. So the first 2 days, yeah, 10 teams are going to make it through just by winning a game, but that's obviously going to be quite rare for a lot of teams. The most thing that matters is just making sure you're in upper bracket for day 3, not lower bracket, because if you make lower bracket day 3, you only get to play the 3 games. You only have 1 chance. So if you follow the arrows, a lot of teams actually think it's easier to make upper day 3 by doing it through lower bracket day 2. you've only got to get top 30 out of 200 teams in lower bracket day 2, compared to if you get bottom 25 in a set lobby, again, the hardest lobby of the day, you then are going to drop down to lower bracket. So even the semifinals format currently makes no sense. So again, all you have to do is make it to round 4 of a single week, week 1, and then you're essentially not playing for anything, because even the semifinals isn't that much of a benefit going into upper bracket. It just makes no sense. Now, there's a few ways to fix this. Before you even get to the semifinals, we could go back to having auto qualifications like we used to in the past. If you place top like 5 teams, whatever, you go straight through to grand. So it gives you a reason to want to play to get top 5. But what we actually saw was, because it was still easy for these really good teams to go on and qualify anyway, a lot of them would deliberately grief themselves to not qualify because they wanted to make sure they kept playing for the practice, but they also wanted to hold down their drop spot. If you auto qualify and you go through, that means your drop spot's up for grabs for any other team. They now drop there, they qualify, and they contest you in grand finals, which is a much bigger issue. We saw this. Kanata's team, I think back in chapter 2 season 6, I was actually commentating on the official broadcast. They deliberately jumped off high ground to make sure they died to not get enough points to go through. It was extremely awkward. The other reason why auto quals don't really work is because you can't have prize money. The reason why Epic took prize money out of the qualifying weeks is because of auto quals. If you get top 5 and go straight through, you're missing out on a chance at more money if you didn't qualify. So they obviously need to take that money out. But now they've taken out the auto quals and the money. So now we're left with nothing. If we just had money in the qualifying weeks, it would make the game so much more competitive. There's something to play for, there's something to grind for, there's a reason to want to qualify, and it's just more exciting for the pros to play for. Right now, most of the qualifying weeks is just playing to hold down your drop spot, and that's it. If we had auto quals come back, I wouldn't be thrilled, but it would at least give them something to play for. But ideally, we just have money back. And I'm not talking like MMB during Season X FNCS, where I think they each made over $100,000 in just the qualifiers alone. As a trio, they made over $300,000 in the qualifiers. It doesn't even have to be that much. Even if it's just the duo cash cup prize pool, just something to play for would help so much in the qualifying finals. Now, how would I fix the semifinals format? Because obviously I've just talked about how upper and lower bracket don't really make sense. Now, I need to make this clear. When they first proposed this upper lower bracket, I wasn't super against it. I liked that Epic tried something. It kind of made sense when I first looked at it, but since we've now seen it play out, because Fortnite is such an in-depth game when it comes to set lobbies versus not set lobbies, contested versus not contested, it just doesn't work. It's complicated, which complicated is not always bad. Some of the best formats are complicated because they need to be to get the best players and be the most competitive. But this one, unfortunately, is very, very complicated. If you didn't understand that graph I showed, don't worry, you're not alone. A lot of people don't, but it's also not competitive either. So it is the worst of both worlds. Either you have it where it's simple to understand, but maybe not as competitive, or you have it be complex and no one really gets it, but at least it's competitive. So we need to go kind of maybe simpler here. I think just going back to the good old 4 heats format worked really well. If you don't know how FNCS used to work, semifinals was just literally 4 different heats. 200 teams would qualify, and you'd get randomly put into one of 4 heats. Super simple, super exciting. Everyone understood it. There was a little bit of RNG. Obviously, you could just get a better heat, which was always a bit of a frustration for most people. Sometimes you'd get into a heat with another really good team contesting you. That was kind of the luck of the draw. You could avoid this and make a heat still simple but better by having a seeding system. If you place really, really well in the qualifying weeks, then you get put into a heat that has a lot of the lower teams who now need to do well to prove themselves against the upper team as a disadvantage for doing worse in the qualifying weeks. This would make a lot of sense, but again, you don't even really need to do this. But also, because usually most of the heats, it was like, you know, top 12 or top 13 teams are qualifying through, depending on the format, it was still really, really exciting. And even if you were contested by a good team, you could still pull it off. It wasn't like, you know, a victory format where you had to win the game to go through. Next up, I would love to see reboot rounds come back, but not in their current format. Having the winner of each of the upper bracket games go through to grands is quite exciting, and it gives the players something to play for in the semifinals. But I want to go back to the good old 1 reboot round. If you remember, if you were there when Zate won the reboot round or when Sprite won the reboot round with that 1v3 clutch, it was just so exciting. The beauty of the reboot round is one last chance. Epic is just, unfortunately, in my opinion, overdoing it with these formats. They've now made the reboot round kind of style of automatically qualifying just feel a little bit more watered down. I'm still excited to watch it, but not as excited as I should be. So I think the semifinals format, we need to go back to nice and simple heats. It's better in every single way, in my opinion. Now, grand finals, I ultimately have no problem with. I like a 2-day grand finals. It mitigates some of that RNG. Obviously, it gives the chance for the better teams to do better. Just because you have a couple bad games, it doesn't completely throw it. You do have the issue that while being contested in a 12-game format, it's much harder to win. I also like the 1.5 times multiplier on day 2. 2-time multiplier felt a little bit too much. It kind of made day 1 not really feel that important, whereas the 1.5 times multiplier kind of creates that storyline, makes it exciting, gives teams a chance who can go and hit the VODs and change their game style, but it doesn't make day 1 feel completely useless. So for the most part, I actually really like how the grand finals format is running currently, and I wouldn't change it. That's the one thing I do like. Now, that is the whole FNCS done, except for the LAN, which I'll talk about in a second, and there wasn't really that many major changes I'm asking for. I'm not asking for them to completely revolutionize everything, and also, I'm just taking the best parts of the formats we've had and putting them together. I'm not even trying to create an entirely new format. I'm just taking the parts that Epic's done in the past that worked and bringing them back. I don't know why, in a lot of ways, Epic tries to keep reinventing the wheel and changing a format that previously I feel like was pretty well loved and pretty well understood. I don't know why we feel the need to change it, but we can just bring all those parts together and can have such a good format so easily. Following that same pattern of thought, I really want to see this happen for the LAN event. Something that Epic did, which they've never done before at the last LAN event, was qualifiers. It was amazing. 75 teams went, only the top 50 made it through, and it was so good. It made it that we had the best, most stacked competitive lobby we've ever seen. I'll argue that against anyone, because teams who went didn't automatically guarantee their spot. They had to beat out other teams and prove they were the best of the best and they deserved to be there. Just because you did well on your region, you know, like 6 or 7 months ago in the first season of the year, you still had to prove that you were worth making it to the finals. And most of the teams who qualified from the small regions or even some of the big regions who, you know, fell off didn't make it through, and that made sense. That made perfect sense. You have to earn your spot at the LAN against other teams at LAN. You might be an online warrior only. Obviously, people in the Fortnite community like saying everyone's cheating. It can just be because the nerves or the pressure gets to them, but you still have to earn your spot on LAN once you get to LAN. This was so amazing and such a good concept. I mean, we also had the Last Chance Major, which is a super exciting tournament on its own that really felt super rewarding, but it felt fair. If you qualified through the Last Chance Major, you only got to play 1 day of the qualifiers at LAN, not 2, which was a big disadvantage, but there was still the hope. There was still that last chance. Now, unfortunately, Epic being Epic didn't go the full way. They added LAN qualifiers, which we all loved, but then they only made the finals 6 games 1 day, and this massively hurt the competitiveness of that finals. Because you only had those 6 games, there was a lot of people saying that, you know, the zones were super favorable to certain teams. Because of the lag, it didn't really count, and it's added a lot of question marks to that grand finals lobby, which I don't think should have been there. If we just had 2 days of qualifiers, 2 days of finals, it's the best of both worlds. You've already flown all these teams out. You've already spent all the money on the staff, the venue, all those expenses. Adding 1 extra day is such a small investment to add so much competitiveness. So this LAN, we are not going to have any qualifiers, but we are going to have a 2-day final. So we have one of the things we wanted, not both. Again, let's just take one of the things we did really well in the past, combine it with what we're currently doing well, and we have the perfect combination. Again, I'm kind of talking about this FNCS format. I hope I'm not just coming across as complaining. I'm trying to give solutions, but their solutions Epic has already done themselves. They just need to take the best parts, leave behind the rest, and we're in a really, really good spot. The last thing I'll discuss is obviously the bye week. Why is there such a long break in the middle of FNCS? Now, last season, not really sure what happened there. Don't know why the bye week stretched out for so long. Epic just decided they needed a really long break for whatever reason. Now, this season's a little bit different. Epic has gone on their 2-week break. They go on every single year for summer. Most of the staff go on break. It's very, very hard for them to keep up demand of running the game, whether it be like, you know, fixing bugs or banning cheaters, and I'll get to that in a second, trying to fix up things. So I don't absolutely hate having a 1-week bye week, a chance for everyone to rest, kind of settle, understand what's going on, figure out strategies, figure out job spots, kind of really just digest what's happening in the qualifying weeks and get set up for the semifinals. It also gives Epic a chance to run through the leaderboards, check for cheaters, which yes, they could be doing a better job for, but I think having that week would really, really help. But this extra long break is just way too much. But this season does make sense. Again, like I said earlier in the video, competitive is not Epic's main priority. So FNCS just has to fit in when it fits. And they decided that it needs to fit in right now, starting early, and then having a big break in the middle for Epic summer break. They're not going to move the summer break for FNCS. They're not going to keep staff on just for FNCS. I wish they did, but clearly as a company, they decided not. So I can live with that, but I do really wish we would have the FNCS kind of get a little bit more priority. Maybe it could have ran later in the season, all back to back. This big break just kills so much of the hype. It kills so much of the excitement. Now, on the topic of cheaters, yes, I wish Epic would be way more diligent about banning cheaters. It is becoming a big issue, especially in zero builds. The zero build tournaments right now, I'm pretty sure have just been added to be cheater magnets. They are taking so many cheaters by running at the same time as the build tournaments that I'm not seeing as many in builds tournaments. I'm still seeing them, but right now zero build looks like an absolute nightmare. And that takes me on to my final point. Zero build FNCS. I'm sorry, I haven't really talked about it too much in the past. I would love to see it run with the exact same format as FNCS builds, and I would love to see it run in general. A trio or squad, zero build FNCS running at a different time to build. I don't think they should run at the same time. I think that's incredibly stupid just for viewership, for player base, for everything the FNCS stands for. Separate them. It would be so exciting. I think it needs to be a bigger team game mode because that is where it thrives in zero builds, when you kind of have, you know, multiple teammates to coordinate, to kind of use utility well. It becomes less RNG and it does make it more competitive. I think that would be super exciting and super fun. I don't think Epic would do it, but I'd absolutely love to see it. That was a lot of talking. I hope you followed it. If you made it this far, you're a real one. I love you. Please chuck a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I will be bringing all the hype for FNCS semifinals starting soon in a couple weeks, but I hope this is the last time we see this FNCS format. Please, Epic, please listen to us. It can be so much better.